Before the blade fell on the neck of France's most hated queen, the people who had turned against her set up one last cruel spectacle. They didn't just want to end her life. They wanted to erase everything she represented, to completely destroy her legacy. The truth was, Marie Antoinette had already been reduced to a symbol of everything that was wrong with the French monarchy. From the excesses of Versailles to the constant rumors about her lavish lifestyle, she had become the face of France's royal excesses. But when the time came for her final hours, her enemies went even further. It wasn't enough to execute her quietly and swiftly. They made sure her last moments were public, humiliating, and designed to strip her of her dignity. Her royal throne, once a seat of absolute power, was replaced by a rough wooden cart, a crude and uncomfortable vehicle meant for common criminals. This brutal journey across the hostile streets of Paris was more than just a trip to her death. It was a public shaming, meant to strip away every trace of her former glory. Her final moments, though, became something else entirely. What they wanted was to see her break, to see her collapse into despair in front of the masses. But they didn't get that. Instead, they saw a woman who, despite everything, found a quiet, unbreakable grace. In the face of unimaginable cruelty and humiliation, Marie Antoinette didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't show weakness. Her dignity remained intact, even in the face of death. This is the story of how she confronted her end, not with fear or anger, but with an unexpected kind of strength that left a lasting mark, far beyond the blade's fall. Forget the magnificent halls and shining mirrors of Versailles, where Marie Antoinette once dazzled as France's queen. Our story now takes us to a very different place, the cold, damp, and oppressive cell of the Conciergerie prison. This grim medieval fortress, tucked away in the heart of Paris, had earned a chilling nickname, the waiting room for the guillotine. It was a place where those marked by the revolution faced their final days, a place of imprisonment, misery, and imminent death. It was on August 2nd, 1793, after months of captivity alongside her family, that Marie Antoinette was torn away from her loved ones. Her children, her sister-in-law, all were removed from her side, and she was brought to this place, alone. She was no longer the Queen of France. She was now a number. For the next 76 days, she was known simply as Prisoner 280. No more royal gowns or flowing robes. No more intricate hairstyles or lavish feasts. The woman who had once sat at the top of France's social hierarchy was reduced to a mere shadow of her former self. Her new home was nothing short of miserable. The stone walls of her cell were damp, and the air inside was thick with the smell of decay. The floor was bare, and the bed provided only a thin, uncomfortable straw mattress. There was no warmth, no comfort, no privacy. Every moment of her life was watched. 2 guards were assigned to her cell at all times, observing her every move, from when she ate the tasteless prison slop to when she tried to sleep on that hard, cold bed. They even watched as she struggled to change her clothes behind a flimsy screen, a practice that was meant to break her spirit and remind her that she no longer had the privileges of royalty. But what was far worse than the physical squalor of her prison cell was the emotional and psychological torment that she faced. Just weeks before her transfer to the Conciergerie, the revolutionaries had stormed the Temple prison in the dead of night. Their target was her son, Louis Charles, her beloved 8-year-old boy. Marie Antoinette's desperate cries and frantic attempts to protect him echoed through the night. But the guards were merciless. They tore him from her arms, ripping him away from the only mother he had ever known. The last time she saw him, he was being dragged away by the revolutionaries. Her heart shattered into pieces that night, and that grief would never leave her. Her maid, Rosalie Lamolière, later testified that it was only when the Queen spoke of her children that she ever truly broke down. The tears that she held back for months finally came, but only in the silence of her prison cell, when she remembered the faces of the children she would never see again. The crown, the palace, the jewelry, none of it mattered in that moment. What mattered most to Marie was the loss of her children, the deepest and most painful wound of all. Her life as a queen had been full of privileges and grand events, but now, stripped of her royal titles, stripped of her family, stripped of her dignity, Marie Antoinette was faced with a fate that none could escape. Her spirit was being tested, but the grief of a mother was a weight heavier than any prison bars. Despite all the efforts to break her, it was this sorrow, the deep loss of her children, that would define her final days. On October 14th, 1793, Marie Antoinette was dragged into the courtroom for what would be the most humiliating moment of her life, a trial that was little more than a political spectacle. The Revolutionary Tribunal had already decided her fate long before she set foot in the court. She had less than a day to prepare for the charges that would be thrown at her, charges so absurd and twisted that they seemed almost too cruel to be real. Treason, corruption, betrayal. These were the accusations that had been leveled against her. But the most appalling of all was the claim that she had committed an unspeakable crime with her own son, Louis Charles. The charge was not only a lie, but a vile manipulation of her child, who was terrified into signing a statement against his mother. It was a grotesque moment in history, a mother being accused of something so hideous it shocked even the most hardened revolutionaries in the room. At first, Marie remained silent. She was a woman who had been publicly humiliated for years, but this was different. This attack on her character went beyond politics. It was a direct assault on her identity as a mother. After a long pause, she stood up. She didn't look at the judges or the prosecutors. Instead, she turned to the gallery of women who filled the room, the same women who had once called for her blood. With quiet dignity, she said, "I appeal to all mothers here. In that single moment, the Queen transformed. She was no longer the hated Madame Deficit or the extravagant foreign queen. She was a mother defending her honor against a monstrous, unfounded lie." For a brief second, even the cold-hearted crowd softened. But despite her brave words, the verdict was already clear. The court's decision was a foregone conclusion: guilty. Death by guillotine. In the early hours of October 16th, 1793, Marie Antoinette's last moments as a queen were stripped away piece by piece. The guards ordered her to change from her black mourning dress, the last reminder of her royal status, into a simple, threadbare white gown. It was a harsh, symbolic act meant to show how far she had fallen. Her once beautiful hair, which had been styled high and adorned with jewels, was hacked off in a cruel gesture to rob her of her femininity. To complete the degradation, her hands were tightly bound behind her back, a stark contrast to the Queen, who had once waved gracefully to her subjects from the balcony of Versailles. At 11 a.m., the gates of her prison cell creaked open. But unlike her husband, Louis XVII, who had been given a carriage for his final journey, Marie Antoinette was thrown into an open cart, the same crude cart used for common criminals. As she was paraded through the streets of Paris, a sea of angry faces jeered and spat at her. But through it all, she sat straight, her face composed and proud, as if refusing to let her humanity be crushed under the weight of their hatred. When the cart finally reached the scaffold, she stepped down and began to climb the wooden steps to her death. In a final, bizarre moment of grace, she accidentally stepped on the foot of her executioner. With no anger or fear in her voice, she simply said, "Pardon me, sir. I did not mean to." That single act of kindness, spoken to the man who would end her life, was her final victory. It was a moment of dignity amidst unimaginable cruelty. The blade fell at 12:15 p.m. The crowd erupted in cheers. But though her life was taken, her spirit, her strength, would endure. The Queen was buried in an unmarked grave, thought to be erased from history. Yet years later, her remains were exhumed and reburied among France's kings, forever remembered for her grace in the face of death. They took her crown, her life, and her titles, but they never took her strength. History is written in power, but it is shaped by grace. Marie Antoinette's final moments remind us that even in the face of unimaginable cruelty, dignity and strength can still prevail. If you believe stories like hers, stories that speak to the human spirit, resilience, and the untold chapters of history should never fade, then join us. Hit subscribe and become a part of preserving these powerful stories. Let's keep the past alive, learning from it, remembering it, and sharing it with the world. Stay with us, because history is far from over.